The rain hammered against the tall glass windows of St. Vincent's Hospital, casting streaks of gray light across the room where Daniel Graves stood motionless beside his daughter's bed. The CEO, who had conquered empires of technology and finance, now looked like a man undone, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Little Emma lay beneath the crisp white sheets, her frail body surrounded by blinking monitors and cold machinery. Her skin had lost its color, her lips faintly blue, her breath coming in shallow whispers that broke the silence every few seconds. Daniel's trembling hand brushed the tiny strands of blonde hair from her forehead, remembering how that same head once rested on his shoulder when she laughed at bedtime stories. A team of doctors, some of the most respected in the world, had just left the room. 43 of them, flown in from Paris, Tokyo, Zurich, and Boston. Specialists in rare diseases, neurology, immunology, all of them defeated. They spoke softly, but Daniel could hear the words that crushed him every time. "We've done everything we can." He wanted to scream. He wanted to tear the machines apart, to demand the universe to explain why all his wealth and power couldn't save one small girl. His wife, Claire, sat in the corner with her face buried in her hands. The sound of her muffled sobs filled the air, fragile and raw. "She's slipping away," she whispered. "Daniel, she's slipping away, and there's nothing we can do." Her voice shattered mid-sentence. Daniel turned toward her, his jaw tightening. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "No, there has to be someone. There has to be a way." But his conviction faltered as he looked at the monitors, the falling oxygen levels, the heart rate slowing into a rhythm that terrified him. He fell into the chair beside Emma's bed, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the lifeless toys scattered around. A teddy bear with a missing button eye, a drawing Emma had made before she fell ill, a picture of their family holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Daniel swallowed hard as he looked at it, his chest tightening until he could barely breathe. The doctors called it an unknown systemic failure, a phrase that sounded like a death sentence wrapped in medical jargon. A faint sound made him look up. Emma's lips moved. "Daddy!" Her voice was so small, so weak that it barely existed. He leaned in close. "I'm here, sweetheart." Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "I'm cold." Her tiny fingers twitched toward him, and he immediately took her hand, pressing it to his face. It was frighteningly cold. "I'll keep you warm," he whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "I promise." The machines beeped in slow, mechanical rhythm, a cruel countdown to something he couldn't stop. Daniel pressed his forehead against her hand and broke. The sobs came quietly at first, then harder, shaking his entire body. For the first time in his life, he prayed. Not for success, not for control, just for mercy. "Please," he murmured through his tears, his voice barely a breath. "Take everything I have, everything I've built. Just don't take her, please." Outside the room, the world went on. Nurses walked briskly. Announcements echoed over intercoms, and somewhere down the hall, a young boy with a mop paused mid-step, hearing the faint echo of a desperate father's plea through the half-open door. The night shift at St. Vincent's was usually quiet, but that evening the air felt heavy, tense with failure. The doctors had retreated to their offices, whispering in disbelief at the case that had defeated them all. The janitorial staff moved silently through the halls, mopping floors and emptying bins, avoiding the ICU wing where the whispers of tragedy seemed to echo louder. Luis pushed his cleaning cart slowly, his small frame almost swallowed by the oversized uniform. His dark curls stuck to his forehead with sweat, and his brown eyes flicked nervously toward the room where Emma Graves lay fighting for her life. He'd seen the girl many times, smiling, waving at him from her bed when he came to empty trash or wipe the glass. She had once told him she liked how the floors always smelled like lemon after you clean. It was the kind of small kindness that Luis never forgot. Now she looked so fragile behind that glass, her skin almost the same color as the sheets. He'd overheard one of the doctors earlier say, 43 specialists and still nothing. We've run every test. The words hit him harder than he expected. 43 doctors, and still no one could help her. Luis's mother, Maria, appeared at the end of the hall, her tired eyes softening when she saw him. Luis, finish up, mijo. Don't linger where you shouldn't. Her voice was gentle but carried the weight of years of hardship. She worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat after his father's death. A man who had once been a nurse in Mexico, known for his heart more than his credentials. Luis had grown up watching his father treat neighbors, listening to stories of diagnoses, herbal remedies, and rare conditions. After he passed, Luis had clung to those memories like a map he was too young to read, but too afraid to lose. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, Luis saw the last specialist leave Emma's room, shaking his head. Daniel Graves stood alone by the bed, a shadow of himself, his shoulders bent in defeat. The sight carved something deep into Luis's chest. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't courage, not exactly, but something stronger than fear. A voice inside him whispered that he couldn't just watch this happen. Not when maybe, just maybe, he knew something they didn't. When his mother turned the corner with her cart, Luis slipped quietly through the half-open ICU door. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure the machines would pick up the sound. The rhythmic beeps surrounded him, alien and hypnotic. He took a deep breath, remembering the old medical journals he used to read during breaks, the YouTube lectures he secretly watched on his phone, and the pages of notes he kept hidden in his school books. He walked to Emma's bedside, his hands trembling. Her face was ghostly pale. He glanced at the monitors. Oxygen saturation low, heart rate erratic. Then he noticed something. Her fingernails, faintly discolored, almost grayish. Her pupils, slow to react to the light. He remembered reading about enzyme reactions, about how certain medications could trigger toxic responses in rare genetic conditions. He leaned closer to the IV line, sniffing. There was a faint chemical tang. Wrong, somehow. His gut twisted. No, this isn't right, he whispered. He followed the tube to the bag hanging above her bed. A complex mixture of antibiotics and stabilizers. He recognized the label from a training manual he'd once skimmed. They're treating the wrong thing, he murmured. He froze, his brain racing. Contamination. A chemical reaction. It wasn't the disease. It was the medicine itself. Without hesitating, he unplugged the IV line. The machine shrieked an alarm. His pulse spiked. He didn't stop. He reached into the nearby supply cabinet, he'd seen nurses do it countless times, and pulled a fresh saline bag. His fingers worked fast, trembling but precise, connecting it, flushing the line, balancing the oxygen feed. He adjusted the flow manually, recalibrating by instinct and memory. He looked at Emma's face, whispered, "Come on, little one, just hold on." Then he stood back, breathing hard, praying he hadn't just made a fatal mistake. The seconds stretched like hours. For the first time in days, her breathing evened slightly. Shallow, but steady. He didn't know if it would last. He only knew he had to try. He had to do something. Then the footsteps came. The doctors, the alarms, the chaos. Luis froze, the mop still in his hand, ready to face whatever storm he had just unleashed. The blaring alarm ripped through the stillness of the ICU. Doctors stormed in, their white coats flaring like startled wings, barking orders as machines beeped wildly. Daniel Graves jolted upright, his heart slamming in his chest. He rushed to his daughter's bedside, fear crushing his breath. But then he stopped. Something was different. Emma's chest was moving, steady and rhythmic. Her cheeks had a faint hint of color. For the first time in weeks, her lips weren't trembling with pain. The lead physician pushed past him, scanning the monitors, his brow furrowing in disbelief. "Her vitals are stabilizing," he muttered, adjusting the equipment. "That's impossible. She was in full systemic collapse 10 minutes ago." Another doctor stared at the screen, mouth open. "Her oxygen levels are back to normal." "How?" He turned, confusion flashing to anger. "Who touched her IV?" All eyes turned toward the corner of the room, where a mop clattered softly against the wall. Luis stood there, small and pale under the harsh fluorescent light, his hands shaking. He swallowed hard, his voice unsteady but clear. "I did." The room froze. A nurse gasped. The chief doctor's face turned red with fury. You tampered with her treatment? Do you have any idea?" Daniel's sharp voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Wait. He turned toward Louise, his gaze intense, desperate. What did you do? Louise's throat felt dry as dust, but he forced the words out. The IV bag. It wasn't reacting right. I smelled something off. I think the compound was interacting with a rare enzyme deficiency. It was poisoning her, not helping. He pointed at Emma's hand, her skin now warmer, the blue tint fading. I replaced it with saline and adjusted the oxygen flow. It stopped the reaction. The doctors exchanged looks, disbelief, skepticism, and something close to awe. One of them quickly opened the discarded IV bag, sniffed, examined the label, then went pale. He's right, the doctor whispered. There's contamination in the solution. If it had... Continued. He looked at Daniel. She wouldn't have lasted another hour. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel took a step forward. His voice broke as he whispered, "You saved her." Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at his daughter's face, color blooming softly beneath her pale skin, eyelids fluttering faintly. The impossible had happened. Louis lowered his gaze, stammering, "I didn't mean to interfere, sir. I couldn't let her die." He braced himself for the reprimand he knew was coming. But Daniel moved closer, slowly, like a man seeing light for the first time after years of darkness. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Firm, trembling. "You didn't interfere," he said quietly. "You listened. Something 43 doctors couldn't do." The lead doctor cleared his throat, still stunned. "Who are you, son?" Louise hesitated, glancing at the floor. "Louise, my mom cleans the East Wing." Silence hung heavy, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the monitor. Then Daniel's voice filled the room again, steady and commanding. "From this moment on, Louis and his mother are no longer cleaning these halls. He's going to school, medical school, and I'll make sure he has everything he needs. Because he's not just a janitor's son." His eyes glistened as he looked at the boy who had given him back his child. "He's the reason my daughter's alive." Tears filled Louise's eyes as Emma stirred, her small hand twitching. Her voice, soft and faint, whispered, "Daddy?" Daniel dropped to his knees beside her bed, clutching her hand, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." And behind him, Louise stood still, breath shaking, eyes wet, as doctors and nurses stared in quiet awe. A miracle had happened that night. Not one born of wealth or status or medical genius, but of compassion, courage, and a boy who refused to look away when everyone else had given up.